Hey Mike, hope you're doing great. My
Yes.
name, my name is Naba and I'm your host for today. And we are very happy to have you with us as our guest in the brand new series of Media Matters under Fabless.
Great to
So,
be here.
before starting the question and this whole insane conversation which we'll have today, I would like to say that I'm honored to be your interviewer today.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be your
Yeah.
guest.
Yeah. So, shall we proceed with the questions? Okay. So, my very first question for you is that what inspired you to start Plotlines, and how has your role evolved over past 12 years in Plotlines?
Sure. Well, I spent about 10 years as communications director at HOK, which is a global
Okay.
architecture and design firm. So during that time, I fell in love with telling the stories of the people and the projects and the expertise there. I
Mhm.
left in 2010 and worked in a different industry, but I really missed working with architects and
Mhm.
designers. So I decided to jump back into the industry, roll out my own business, which is Plotlines, a communications consulting firm. And I have the
Yeah.
opportunity to tell the stories of lots of different firms. About 80% of my clients are in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry.
Okay.
And in terms of how it's changed and evolved, well, certainly there's more noise now than ever. Everyone is trying to get their stories out there, and thought leadership has really taken off as a way to communicate a firm's expertise. So that makes it
Yeah.
challenging to stand out and be impactful with whatever story you're communicating.
Okay, yeah, that's great, by the way. Okay, so my next question is, how do you tailor your storytelling techniques to fit different mediums, whether it's for social media, a press release, or a long form content?
Yeah, well, I always like to start with the audience first, who you're trying to reach
Okay.
ultimately, and that helps define where you reach them and how you reach them.
Yeah.
The more you can hone in on who exactly you want to connect with, what they care about, where they hang out, that helps
Yeah.
define, okay, this should be on social media, this should be on a blog, this maybe is in an industry publication. I think the
Yeah.
best stories, though, are used in many ways. They're adapted and repurposed for various audiences in various forms, long form,
Yeah.
short form, in the middle. So I think there's lots of opportunities to connect with folks, but I'm all about kind of knowing who you're trying to reach and then reaching them where they want to be reached.
Okay. Well, coming to the next question, as the digital platforms and content marketing continues to grow, how do you modify your peer strategies and how do you stay up to date with the new media trends? So could you please just elaborate that?
Yeah, I mean, it is tough because things are changing constantly. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the great thing is that the cost of entry is pretty low. Most of these platforms are free or very inexpensive, so you can really explore and experiment a bit, see what works, what doesn't, modify appropriately. Obviously, you need to be smart about it and be on target with what you're trying to say and who you're trying to say it for. But I think it's about, essentially being not telling the stories in the same way in the same place, but kind of exploring, experimenting, and staying on top of sort of what seems to be gaining traction and where people are starting to hang
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are your top three tips for developing a compelling story for a client's brand?
Yeah, well, I think the first tip I would provide is always include people. As
Yeah.
humans, we want to hear and learn about other humans. And so it's easy, and many firms do, kind of get a little bit focused exclusively on the object, the building, the space, the landscape, the infrastructure, which of course is what architects and designers kind of do. But
Yeah.
I think it makes it so much more compelling and powerful to weave in a personal perspective. The perspective of designers, the perspective of the client or owner, the perspective of someone who's inhabiting the building or potentially going to use the space. There's always opportunities to weave that in, and I think it only makes for a stronger story. Tip
Okay.
number two is to always include some bit of conflict. Every good story has conflict.
Yeah, it
So whether
does.
that's what challenge did you overcome, what problem did you run into in the middle of the project, and how did you address it? where did you get derailed and how did you get back on track? You know, clients can sometimes want to tell just the sanitized version of all the good stuff and the wonderful end product, which is wonderful to celebrate. But how did you
Yeah,
get there, and what stood in your way? Because no project, I've never witnessed a project that has gone completely smoothly. They always have, kind
indeed.
of, yeah. So
Yeah,
anyway, tell that part of the story, because you're not anyone who's lived through any of these projects knows that they don't all go smoothly. So that's part of the story, and it should be part of the story.
yeah.
My third tip,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, your third tip, please.
Okay. Well, my third tip is to show, don't tell. I mean, this is something I learned early on in my kind of media and writing classes, which is, it's not about describing things. It's about painting a picture with words, include
Yeah,
emotions,
exactly.
include descriptions and details. It doesn't mean it's long and boring and dull, but it means, we want precise examples. So if someone who wasn't there or doesn't even necessarily see a photo can get an idea about what it's like to be there and work on the project or experience it. And novelists, of course, do this all the time. We're not writing novels, of course, but I think we can take some tips from good feature writers and novelists about how they bring someone into a story by not just describing, but basically showing through words.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to know what role does visual storytelling it plays in your work, and how do you integrate in with it with written contents?
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm primarily a writer, but I have a huge love and admiration for visuals. And of course, in this industry, they're baked into everything. Compelling
Yeah.
photos and graphics, and of course, video. I'm all about telling the story in that way. Sometimes, as a writer, I think you need to have the insight and the humility to recognize when sometimes the words are the primary mode of communications, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes the
Yeah.
visual tells the stories and the words support it through a caption or through a headline or a pull-out quote or a few words here or there. I think words always play a role, but sometimes they're the primary role. Sometimes they take a secondary role, but always, visuals always enhance a story. And ideally, the
Yeah.
words and the images should work together.
Together. Yeah. So, my next question is, in what ways do you think your background in PR has given you an edge in creating compelling content?
Yeah, well, I'm a trained journalist. I went to journalism school, so I can
Yeah.
sniff out a good story. I have the kind of been trained to look for the news value, the who, what, when, where, why, and how of a story. So even if you're not
That
ultimately going,
inverted pyramid of
yeah,
journalism, right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So even if you're not going to be communicating it as a straightforward news story, it's still good to get your arms around, okay, what is the news here? What is the main point? And understanding what those elements are, and then crafting the story appropriately. And also, kind of stepping back and saying, what are the potential negative aspects of this story? Is there something we're not seeing? Is there a potential way this could be spun in a negative way? If so, let's figure out how to address that, or
Yeah,
be ready to respond to it.
exactly. Well, what strategies do you employ to conceive new and engaging content that truly connects with Plotline's audience?
Well, I like to I like to stay on top of news and what's going on in the world, and of course, there's a lot of noise out there, a lot going on. I think
Yeah,
architects and designers are in a unique position, because so much of what they do and what they bring to the world helps address many of the issues that we're grappling with. Whether it's climate change, healthcare costs, affordable housing, sustainability, workplace, the evolving workplace, all those issues,
yeah,
architects and designers are front and center. So it's sort of like we should be part of the addressing the issue and talking about it, and being part of those conversations. So it's not difficult. I think it's sometimes clients can be challenged to want to stick their neck out, so to speak. They want to not necessarily upset the apple cart, but I think some of the best and most compelling stories, add a different point of view, a different, kind of don't just add to the noise, but add a
yeah,
different perspective. And of course,
exactly.
you even though it's important to kind of look for opportunities to kind of add your perspective. you obviously
Yeah,
want to avoid controversial issues like politics and religion and things like that. And
exactly. That's very important, by the way.
yeah, so and
Okay.
it's hard.
Exactly. Coming to the next question, what ethical dilemmas have you faced in your career and how did you navigate them?
Well, I think, I think it's always important to tell the truth. Sometimes clients, companies inevitably have a crisis to deal with or negative news to try to manage. It's never a good idea to try to sweep that under the rug or bury your head in the sand. I think you need to address it, those issues, and be upfront about it because, if you're going to be lying and telling half the truth, it's going to catch up to you. So I think that it's important that you always make sure that you're being truthful, you're being upfront, you're being transparent. I'm fortunate that I work with clients that agree with that. So if I had a client that didn't want to do
Okay.
that, that wanted to sort of ignore things or spin them in a certain way, I don't think I would be
Yeah.
working with them long.
Okay. Well, how do you approach partnerships and collaboration with the key players in the industry? Well, that's a tricky question, by the way.
Well, the industry is kind of collaboration is baked into the industry. So, architects are used to collaborating with each other and interior designers and engineers and contractors. So it's sort of like built into the whole model of the industry. They need to work together. They
Yeah.
sometimes it makes the project better. Sometimes they're essentially forced to work together. Sometimes they choose to work together. But essentially, I take that same approach. I think that bringing in people to my team, whether it's a freelancer or another agency, it only enhances the ability to serve my client. And I'm sometimes brought into other teams to do the same. So it's like there are certain people that have skills that I don't have that can add to my ability to serve a client, or just kind of two
Yeah.
different perspectives. I think it just adds to the strength of what you ultimately deliver to a client.
Yeah, such a great thoughts. Well, what the last question for you is what do you consider to be the next big challenge for the communication strategist, for the budding communication strategist in the coming decades?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's about trust. Clearly, what's happening in the media world at large, which I'm sure you have seen and experienced, is sort of like you don't know what to trust anymore.
Exactly.
With the decline of traditional media and the rising up of sort of everyone has a platform, everyone has a voice, which I think is wonderful, but it gives you, the opportunity or the risk of having these kind of untruths, disinformation, sort of, anyone can say it and anyone can share it. And I love the Mark Twain
Yeah.
quote, which says, "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still lacing up its boots." So it's sort of like nowhere is that more true than today with social media. It's like something be put out there. No one has
Yeah.
actually even substantiated it, and it goes all over the world. People are sharing it, and it suddenly becomes truth. And when it's really not truth. So I think companies on a smaller scale deal with that as well. Sort of, they need to earn the trust of their customers and their stakeholders. So they need to be, kind of credible, and they need to keep that in mind because trust is such a fleeting thing and so important, that to earn.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's all for today. We are pleased to have you, and your conversation was immense. It was amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. So,
Okay,
so happy to have a conversation with you.
my pleasure.